established.
So you're saying without trust, you can't have intimacy?
You can have sex without trust. You can't have real intimacy without trust.
Begins the way most endings do, quietly. A house once filled with laughter, cameras, and carefully rehearsed love now sits in silence. The premiere of Sister Wives Season 20 doesn't open with joy or celebration. It opens with the weight of years. With the ghosts of promises that never survived the reality of ego, manipulation, and heartbreak. The camera drifts slowly across the Brown home, the one Robyn once called their forever space. It's no longer glowing with the warmth she used to insist came from spiritual unity. Instead, it feels cold, heavy, almost sacred in its emptiness. There are photos on the wall that feel more like relics than memories. Every frame holds a version of Kody Brown that doesn't exist anymore. Kody sits there visibly aged, not just by time but by consequence. He tries to carry the same authority he once had, but it's gone. You can see it in the way he slouches into the couch, in the way his words don't fill the room anymore. The fire that once made him larger than life has burned itself out, leaving only the smoke of bitterness and regret. And next to him sits Robyn. The woman who once seemed to have all the answers, the tears, the right words at the right moments. Now she looks like she's waiting for a script that isn't coming. Narrator, low, steady. 4 years. Robyn's role was perfectly cast. She was the one who could cry on cue, not out of calculation but out of instinct. She learned early that in Kody's world, emotion was currency. And Robyn spent it lavishly. She knew that guilt could hold a man closer than love ever could. When Kody's other wives spoke with truth or independence, Robyn offered fragility. When they challenged him, she trembled. When they demanded equality, she whispered loyalty. And in a family built on insecurity, her silence became her greatest weapon. But in this premiere something shifts. It's subtle at first. A hesitation, a pause, a trembling breath that doesn't seem rehearsed. Kody leans forward, his words circling around frustration, and Robyn's mask slips for a fraction of a second. "You don't talk to me the same anymore," she says softly. "You don't even look at me the same." The words land like a confession, not of love but of loss. She's not just afraid of losing Kody's affection, she's terrified of losing control. Because for the first time since she joined the family, Kody isn't predictable. His anger doesn't always lead back to her comfort. His guilt doesn't always return to her arms. The emotional leash she held so tightly is fraying. Narrator. Tone deepens, more introspective. The irony is painful. The woman who fought so hard to be the last one standing now finds herself standing alone. Robyn got everything she once wanted. The legal marriage, the loyalty, the attention, the house that looked like a castle from the outside. But love built on destruction doesn't last. 4 years she played her part perfectly, crying when needed, retreating when threatened, blaming spiritual disconnection whenever Kody's anger turned too sharp. But manipulation, even when it's quiet and polished, has an expiration date. Now she looks around and sees the cost of her victory. Christine is thriving, radiant, laughing again. Janelle, steady and strong, walks in truth without needing Kody's validation. Even Meri, long trapped in silent loyalty, has finally stepped out of the shadows. And Robyn? She sits in a home filled with everything she thought she wanted, and none of the joy she thought it would bring. Narrator. Quiet, haunted. Kody's face tells another story, one of collapse and confusion. For so long he believed that control was leadership, that domination was love, and that loyalty meant obedience. He convinced himself that losing Christine, Janelle, and Meri was their fault, that they gave up, that they betrayed the principle. But now there's no one left to blame except the woman sitting next to him. And it terrifies him. Because deep down, Kody knows that his entire sense of worth was built on being needed. When 4 wives revolved around him, he was the sun. Now he's just a man with one orbit left, and even that planet is drifting away. Narrator. Slow, deliberate in the confessional, Kody's words tumble out in the same circular rhythm fans have grown used to. He talks about heartbreak, betrayal, and loyalty. He says the word family like it's a shield. But his eyes give him away. They're not the eyes of a man fighting for love. They're the eyes of a man trying to survive the collapse of his own myth. Robyn watches him, her expression hard to read. There's pity there but also fear. Fear that the man she molded is slipping beyond her reach. For years she could calm him. With a single tear, she could turn his rage into remorse. With a quiet "I'm sorry," she could make him bend. But now her tears just annoy him. Her softness, once intoxicating, now feels like noise. And the silence that falls between them feels heavier than any fight. Narrator, soft, sorrowful, the illusion that held their world together is cracking. Piece by piece. What once looked like devotion now reads as desperation. What once felt like loyalty now feels like fear. Robyn wanted to be the safe place, but safety built on control isn't safety at all. It's captivity. And now she's trapped in the very web she spun. A life that looks perfect on television but feels suffocating in real time. Kody too is trapped, but in his own delusion. He believed he could rewrite history, that fans would forget how he discarded the women who built his life. He thought the narrative would bend to his will. But this season, the truth is no longer a secret whispered between ex-wives. It's right there in every frame, in every broken glance between him and Robyn. Narrator pauses. This isn't love. It's the aftermath of a long war between ego and illusion. The happy ending they fought for has turned into something haunting. A partnership built on fear, silence, and the ghosts of 3 women who finally walked away. When the credits roll, the music fades and Robyn's face fills the screen. There's no longer sympathy in her tears. There's recognition. A quiet, devastating realization that the story she spent years writing, the one where she and Kody were the heroes, has finally collapsed under the weight of truth. And the saddest part? No one took it from them. They destroyed it themselves. He thinks he's clever when he says it. Sister witches. The words spill out like venom disguised as humor. A petty, sarcastic jab aimed at the women who refused to keep playing his game. But the moment the words leave his mouth, something changes. The mask slips. The bitterness isn't just about betrayal. It's about power. Power he no longer has. Kody doesn't realize it, but that phrase becomes the moment the world sees him for who he's become. A man haunted by his own insecurity, grasping for control in a house full of ghosts. Narrator, voice deepens. He laughs after saying it, as if mocking his ex-wives will make him feel alive again. But behind that forced laughter there's rage, quiet, simmering rage. The kind that comes when the people you thought would worship you start to pity you instead. For years, Kody labeled their independence as rebellion. Christine's laughter became disrespect. Janelle's logic became disloyalty. Meri's silence became weakness. He twisted every act of self-respect into an attack on his authority. But now that authority has no audience, no Christine to argue, no Janelle to reason, no Meri to wait patiently for his scraps of affection. Now all that's left is Robyn, and the echo of every choice he made. Narrator, slow, mournful. In that living room, you can almost feel the ghosts of those lost relationships hanging in the air. The camera doesn't need to show Christine's smile or Janelle's eyes. Their absence is louder than any argument. Kody leans forward, his voice tightening with frustration. They're just trying to make me look bad, he insists. They've turned everyone against me. Even the kids. It's a familiar refrain, one that's worn thin with time. Because what Kody calls betrayal, the world now calls truth. Narrator, softly, painfully. For the first time, Robyn doesn't jump to comfort him. She doesn't offer him the sympathy she once weaponized so beautifully. Instead, she sits in silence, her eyes darting toward the cameras, aware of how the world will see this moment. And maybe for the first time she realizes that her tears can't fix this. That no amount of crying or pleading will make Kody lovable again. Not to the wives, not to the fans, not even to his children. Because the damage is too deep. The grief too real. Narrator pauses, tone heavy. The name that isn't spoken in this scene is Garrison. But his presence lingers. The loss of Garrison Brown hangs like a shadow over this season. A reminder that this isn't just a story about divorce and jealousy. It's a story about emotional neglect. About children who grew up watching love become control and faith become fear. When Kody talks about betrayal, it isn't just about the wives. He's still trying to make sense of a world where his own children have turned away. Where his son died with distance still between them. A distance Kody helped build with pride and denial. Narrator, somber, analytical. That's what makes the Sister Witches comment so cruel and so revealing. It's not a joke. It's projection. He's calling them witches because he needs them to be villains. He needs to believe that the women who finally walked away from his control were evil, not simply free. It's easier that way. It hurts less than admitting that the reason everyone left is him. Narrator, quiet, trembling with empathy, and Robyn, the woman who once prided herself on being the peacekeeper, now finds herself trapped between guilt and survival. For years she defended Kody's outbursts, justified his favoritism, and called his neglect spiritual confusion. She convinced herself that she was doing God's work, holding the family together. But now even she can see the truth. She didn't hold it together. She helped him destroy it. Narrator, music swells, the tone becomes haunting in this episode. Robyn breaks down in her confessional. She cries, not the delicate performative tears fans have grown used to, but the kind of crying that comes from panic. I didn't want this, she sobs. I wanted my family. I wanted all of us together. But the audience doesn't believe her anymore. Because the words come too late. Because the world has already seen the recordings, the favoritism, the manipulation. The way she cried when she didn't get her way but stayed silent when others were hurting. The viewers don't see a victim anymore. They see an accomplice. Narrator, soft, bitter Kody sits beside her, frustrated by her tears. Frustrated that the spotlight isn't on his pain. He glares at the camera and mutters about being ganged up on. He says, I'm tired of being the villain in everyone's story. But what he doesn't realize is that villains rarely know they're villains. They think they're misunderstood heroes, fighting a battle no one appreciates. And that's exactly what Kody's become. A man fighting ghosts he created, blaming everyone but himself for the emptiness he can't escape. Narrator, slow, reflective. By the end of the episode, something in Robyn's expression changes. Her tears dry. Her posture straightens. And behind those eyes there's calculation again. She realizes something. If she can't control Kody through emotion anymore, she'll have to control the narrative instead. And she starts to do what she's always done best. Rewrite history. She talks about the old days, about the wives not understanding her intentions, about being left behind. She reframes herself as the last loyal one, the martyr in a house full of deserters. But the illusion no longer works. Not for Kody. Not for the audience. And not even for her. Because when you've spent years manipulating truth, there's nothing left to hold on to when truth finally fights back. Narrator, voice softens to a whisper. That's the tragedy of it all. They built a house on half-truths and called it faith. They built a marriage on guilt and called it love. And now they're sitting in the ruins, surrounded by cameras that won't stop rolling. The image they once controlled has slipped away. The audience no longer sees a strong patriarch or a devoted wife. They see two people clinging to the ghost of a life they broke with their own hands. Narrator, final tone, reflective, cinematic. As the episode fades to black, Kody mutters something under his breath about evil energy and spiritual warfare. But the real war isn't spiritual. It's emotional. It's the battle between truth and denial, and truth is finally winning. Robyn stares at him, her eyes cold, her voice barely above a whisper. You've lost them all, Kody, and now you're losing yourself. For a moment he says nothing. He just sits there, silent, small, hollow. The king without a kingdom. The husband without a home. And that's how the premiere ends, not with a dramatic fight or a cliffhanger, but with quiet devastation. Because this time the fall isn't just between husband and wife. It's between illusion and reality. Between manipulation and truth. Between who they wanted to be, and who they've finally become. Soft piano fades out. Slow, melancholic. Screen fades to black. They called them sister witches. But maybe they were just women who finally saw the truth. When the episode ended, fans didn't just see drama. They saw truth. Unfiltered, undeniable, and devastating. The illusion that Kody and Robyn had carefully maintained for over a decade finally cracked open, and the entire world could see what lay beneath. Not faith, not unity, not spiritual harmony, but manipulation, ego, and emotional decay. The internet lit up within minutes. Clips of Kody's sister witches rant went viral. Mocked, analyzed, and replayed until his words became symbols of everything wrong with the world he built. For years, Sister Wives was about the family that made polygamy work. Now it was about the collapse of control, a televised reckoning that no amount of TLC editing could soften. Narrator, somber, slow. Viewers notice things the show never intended to highlight. The twitch in Robyn's jaw when Kody interrupts her, the flicker of contempt when she realizes he's no longer defending her publicly. Her mask, once flawless, began to fracture under the weight of public scrutiny. Tears used to earn her sympathy. Now they sparked suspicion. Each confessional became harder to watch, not because of what was said but because of what wasn't. The silence between her sentences screamed louder than her sobs. Narrator voice deepens, and while Robyn and Kody retreated into their carefully crafted world of denial, the rest of the Brown family began to speak, not through interviews or cameras, but through actions, through quiet defiance, through the lives they built far away from Kody's shadow. Christine posted pictures of laughter, not for revenge but for survival. Janelle found strength in simplicity, in truth, in peace. Even Meri, once the quiet loyalist, now walked with a lightness that spoke louder than any words she could ever say. But it was the children, the ones who lived through the chaos, who began to tell the real story. Narrator, softly, the Brown children were no longer silent. Years of unspoken pain began to surface. Not in anger but in grief. They had watched their family split apart on national television, watched their father's affection turn selective, and learned too early what conditional love looks like. For some, that pain turned inward. For others, it turned to distance, a quiet refusal to play a role in the show that caused them so much hurt. And in the wake of Garrison's death, every buried truth became impossible to ignore. Narrator, somber, trembling behind every camera angle and every TLC edit, was a real family, one that fractured under the weight of one man's ego and one woman's control. Kody's grief for Garrison seemed tangled with guilt, but even in his sorrow he couldn't fully let go of the blame. He called it a tragedy, but the silence between his words betrayed something darker, a man haunted by the truth he refused to face. He still talked about respect and loyalty, but those words, once the foundation of his authority, now sounded hollow. Because the truth was simple. Respect cannot survive without empathy. Loyalty cannot survive without love. And both had long since vanished from Kody Brown's world. Narrator, pause, tone deepens. Meanwhile, Robyn began to panic, not because of loss but because of exposure. Her control over the narrative had always relied on invisibility, tears at the right time, silence at the right moment, a facade of faith that made manipulation look like martyrdom. But now, everyone was watching her too closely. Every twitch, every sigh, every carefully crafted confession was dissected online. She wasn't the misunderstood peacemaker anymore. She was the architect of collapse. And that terrified her. Narrator, somberly reflective. TLC's editing could no longer protect her. For the first time, the story was no longer being told by them. It was being rewritten about them. Viewers began demanding transparency. The press started questioning the ethics of the show. And the Brown family's internal fracture became a cultural mirror, a reflection of how far manipulation can go when hidden behind the language of love. Narrator, emotion rising in a later confessional. Robyn's tone shifts again. There are no tears this time, only cold deflection. I just wish they could have loved us back, she says, her voice trembling with practiced sorrow. I tried to make it work, but they never gave me a chance. But the world no longer believes her. Because love was never what she wanted. What she wanted was power. The kind that hides beneath kindness, that smiles while cutting ties, that convinces you the destruction was your fault. Narrator, gentle, grieving. In Kody, the man who once stood at the center of everything, now stands in the ruins of what he built. No family dinners. No plural wives. No unity, no respect, no audience left to believe his version of events. Even his eyes seem smaller now, as though the light that once made him the center of attention has dimmed. The truth is finally louder than his voice. Narrator, whisper, soft piano. The children's grief becomes the story the cameras can't ignore anymore. Their absence speaks volumes. The youngest ones look lost, caught between loyalty and confusion. The older ones, like Logan, Madison, and Michael T., carry years of silent exhaustion. They've seen too much. They've learned what happens when love is conditional, and now they're choosing something else. They're choosing peace. They're choosing distance. They're choosing healing over performance. Narrator, slow, poetic, and in that choice, the truth of the entire saga becomes clear. This was never just a story about polygamy. It was a story about power. About what happens when one person believes love should orbit around them, and another believes control is compassion. It was about the slow death of a dream built on imbalance. Narrator, deeply emotional. Final. Now, when fans look at Robyn and Kody, They don't see the love story TLC once promised. They see the warning. The warning that control disguised as care isn't love. That silence in the name of keeping peace only feeds the storm. That the family who preached unity became the example of what happens when truth is buried too long. And for the Brown children, the ones who grew up inside that storm, this season isn't just television. It's closure. Painful, complicated, but necessary closure. Because sometimes, the only way to heal from manipulation is to finally stop protecting the people who caused it. It began quietly. No explosions. No sudden breaking news. Just silence. The kind of silence that creeps in when everyone stops believing your story. For years, Robyn Brown's tears were her armor. She cried and the world rushed to her defense. But now, those same tears looked rehearsed, dripping down a face that the audience no longer pitied, but pitted for. Because no one was buying it anymore. Not the fans. Not the media. Not even the network. Narrator, slow, cutting tone in the weeks following the season premiere. Social media turned from sympathy to shock. Clips of Robyn's crying interviews flooded TikTok. But this time they weren't met with empathy. They were met with analysis. Freeze frames. Breakdowns. Whole communities dissecting every tremble in her voice, every flick of her eyes toward the camera, every calculated pause between sentences. And in that collective dissection, the world began to see something chilling. Tears that weren't grief, but strategy. Narrator, low, reflective. Robyn's downfall wasn't sudden. It was slow, unraveling thread by thread, until the tapestry of innocence she had woven around herself began to dissolve. She started doing damage control, long rambling live streams about family, forgiveness, and faith. But every word only made things worse. Because for the first time the world wasn't listening with sympathy. They were listening with memory. They remembered the gaslighting, the favoritism, the subtle divide she planted between Kody and his older children. And now it was all catching up to her, live in real time. Narrator, somber. Meanwhile, Kody sat beside her, silent, hollow-eyed, his anger smoldering beneath the surface like a dying fire. He didn't know how to save her because he couldn't even save himself. Once, his confidence filled every room. Now, every word he spoke seemed to echo against the emptiness he'd created. He used to call himself the head of the family. Now he couldn't even manage a household. Bills piled up. Cameo requests slowed to a trickle. And TLC, once their lifeline, had stopped calling as often. Narrator, grieving tone. For Robyn, the collapse was more than public humiliation. It was the loss of the one thing she prized above all else: control. Her world was built on the illusion that she could guide Kody's emotions like a conductor. That his rage, his guilt, his devotion, all of it, belonged to her. But now he was slipping. Not away from her love but into something colder: self-pity, paranoia, and regret. She tried to hold him, to cry for him, to save him. But she couldn't save what he refused to admit was broken. Narrator, low and heavy. And then came the whispers, the stories that started to circulate online. Claims of financial strain, late payments, even rumors of a looming foreclosure on the house that was once the crown jewel of the Brown family. For years, Kody and Robyn lived like royalty while the others lived simply. Now the kingdom had fallen. The walls of their home, once filled with laughter, chaos, and control, echoed with tension and resentment. Robyn would cry in one room. Kody would pace in another. And neither knew how to reach the other anymore. Narrator, reflective pause. The children could feel it too. Dayton, who had always tried to protect his mother, grew distant, quietly withdrawing from the narrative he never wanted to be part of. Aurora stopped appearing on camera altogether, her smile replaced by a weary, uncertain silence. And Brianna, once so defensive of her mother, began to question the story she'd grown up believing. Because it's one thing to watch your parents fight. It's another to realize the whole world was right about them. Narrator, voice trembling. The heartbreak of Garrison's passing hung over all of it like a ghost. A constant reminder of what happens when emotional neglect becomes a family tradition. Fans began revisiting old episodes, finding the quiet moments where pain was hidden in plain sight. Garrison's laughter that masked sadness. Janelle's patience that masked exhaustion. Christine's joy that masked survival. And Robyn's tears that masked manipulation. The illusion was gone. All that remained was the truth. Narrator, somber piano returns. TLC began to rebrand. Fully. Quietly. Strategically. The new promos no longer centered around Kody and Robyn's love story. They centered around Christine's healing, Janelle's strength, and Meri's rebirth. The tagline shifted from "love should be multiplied, not divided" to something softer, more real. Healing after heartbreak. And just like that, the empire Robyn had fought to control slipped through her fingers. She wasn't the star anymore. She was the cautionary tale. Narrator, gentle, poetic. Kody didn't take it well. He blamed everyone. The producers, the fans, the internet, even his own children. But deep down he knew. He had finally lost what he valued most. Not his wives, not his family, but his audience. He built his identity on being seen, being admired, being the man who made the impossible work. Now all he could see in the mirror was a man who destroyed everything he touched. Narrator, haunting tone. Robyn still tried to spin it. She spoke of redemption, of faithful love, of starting over. But every word sounded emptier than the last. Her live streams turned desperate. Pleas for understanding mixed with veiled bitterness toward the other women. She said she forgave them. But forgiveness that hides accusation is just another form of control. The more she spoke, the more her daughters withdrew. The more she cried, the more fans stopped listening. Narrator, quiet, reflective. And so the story that began with 5 hearts became 2 ghosts. One haunted by guilt, the other by exposure. Kody and Robyn, once untouchable, now live in a shadow of what they created. The laughter is gone. The house feels colder. Even the walls seem to whisper the truth they spent years denying. This isn't love anymore. It's punishment. The natural consequence of deception disguised as devotion. Narrator, softly, final. And as Christine, Janelle, and Meri step into the light of healing, Kody and Robyn fade quietly into the background. Symbols of what happens when power consumes love and manipulation masquerades as faith. The world moved on. The show evolved. But the legacy of their downfall remains, etched in the hearts of the children who lived it and the fans who finally saw the truth. Because in the end, Sister Wives stopped being a show about plural marriage. It became a story about awakening, about women who found freedom, children who found truth, and one man and woman who learned too late that control can never be love. When the storm finally broke and the noise around Kody and Robyn began to fade, something unexpected began to grow. Not bitterness, not revenge, but peace. Because sometimes the end of one story is the quiet beginning of another. Narrator, soft smile in the voice. Kody Brown was the first to reclaim her light. The woman once dismissed as jealous, as emotional, as too much, became the one who reminded millions that joy is not rebellion, it's healing. Her laughter returned, not the forced laughter of keeping the peace, but the kind that rises from freedom, the kind that belongs to a woman who finally remembers who she is. Her home became the gathering place again, for her children, for her grandchildren, for the memories that weren't tainted by control or fear. And when TLC approached her for the new series, she didn't hesitate. She said, "I'll do it. But this time, the truth comes first." Narrator, warm tone. The new show was called Breaking Free. Not a spin-off, a rebirth. It wasn't about polygamy anymore. It was about healing. It followed the journeys of Christine, Janelle, and Meri as they rebuilt their lives in the aftermath of years of emotional suppression. Fans were ready. They didn't want perfection. They wanted honesty. They wanted to see women who had walked through fire and learned to stand again. And that's exactly what they got. Narrator, reflective, proud. Janelle's story became the anchor of strength. The quiet resilience that had always held the family together finally got the recognition it deserved. For years she was the calm one. The thinker, the problem solver, the woman who made peace while carrying the weight of everyone else's chaos. Now she was building something new, not just for herself but for her children. The grief of losing Garrison never left her, but it transformed into purpose. She began speaking openly about mental health, about loss, about the pain of watching love turn into isolation. And in doing so she gave thousands of other mothers permission to grieve out loud, without shame. Narrator, gentle piano rises. Then came Meri, the woman who had been silent the longest. Her story was different, quieter, deeper. For years she stood in the background, hoping loyalty would one day be rewarded with love. But loyalty to someone who never saw your worth only drains your soul. And when she finally let go, the world saw her differently. No longer the abandoned wife. No longer the woman waiting for Kody's attention. She was reborn as the woman who found peace in solitude and power in truth. Her retreat in Parowan became a sanctuary, a place for women who had lost themselves in someone else's story. And there, surrounded by laughter, art and reflection, Meri found her own voice again. Narrator, warm, emotional together, Christine, Janelle and Meri built something the old family never could. A sisterhood born from truth, not obligation. They didn't pretend it was easy. They still cried. They still grieved. They still carried the ghosts of what might have been. But now the grief had purpose. The pain had meaning. And the love between them, finally, was free of conditions. Narrator, low, sincere TLC.